Dear seeker, if we pause and observe our lives honestly, we may notice a familiar pattern. We often move from one extreme to another, working tirelessly until exhaustion, then withdrawing completely, holding tightly to pleasure, then rejecting experience altogether when it disappoints us. Though these movements appear natural, they quietly shape much of our suffering. The Buddha's teaching of the middle way was born from this very observation. Before his awakening, he lived both lives fully, one of comfort, luxury, and ease, and another of severe self-denial and physical hardship. Neither led to peace. From this lived understanding, he discovered a truth that remains deeply relevant today. Freedom does not lie at the edges of excess or denial, but in balance guided by wisdom. The middle way is often misunderstood as mediocrity or indecision. In truth, it is either. It is a path of clarity that avoids harmful extremes while engaging life with care and responsibility. It does not weaken effort, it refines it. It does not dull joy, it frees joy from clinging. It does not avoid pain, it teaches us how to meet pain without being consumed by it. In a world that constantly encourages more or nothing at all, the middle way offers a quieter alternative, one rooted in awareness, moderation, and understanding. It asks us to look closely at our habits of thought, emotion, and action, and to question whether they lead to freedom or further straying. In this video, we will explore how the middle way applies not only to spiritual practice, but to everyday life, our work, relationships, ambitions, and inner struggles. Please listen gently, as a seeker reflecting on your own experience. Balance begins not with control, but with understanding. The Buddha's discovery of the middle way. Dear seeker, to understand the middle way, it is important to begin with the Buddha's own journey. His teaching did not arise from speculation or philosophy alone, but from direct experience lived to its limits. Before renunciation, the Buddha lived a life of privilege and refinement. Surrounded by comfort and pleasure, he discovered that indulgence, though enjoyable, did not free the mind from dissatisfaction. Pleasure faded, attachment remained, and unease quietly persisted. After leaving this life behind, he turned fully toward the opposite extreme. Through years of severe ascetic practice, he subjected his body to intense deprivation, believing that self-mortification would purify the mind. Yet this path, too, failed. The body weakened, the mind grew dull, and insight did not arise. From this clear seeing, the Buddha recognized that both extremes, indulgence and self-denial, were rooted in misunderstanding. One fed craving, the other fed aversion. Neither led to wisdom. The middle way emerged as a path that supports the conditions for awakening. It nourishes the body enough to sustain clarity, and disciplines the mind without cruelty. It is neither soft nor harsh, but appropriately balanced. This realization became the foundation of the Buddha's first teaching, in which he described a path that avoids extremes and leads to peace, insight, and liberation. This path later came to be known as the Noble Eightfold Path. The middle way, then, is not a compromise between pleasure and pain. It is a refined understanding of what truly supports freedom. With this insight, the Buddha offered not an ideology, but a practical way of living, one that remains relevant wherever human beings seek peace beyond extremes. Recognizing extremes in everyday life. Dear seeker, while the Buddha first spoke of extremes in the context of spiritual practice, the principle of the middle way extends naturally into the ordinary patterns of daily life. In fact, it is here that extremes most often reveal themselves. We may notice extremes in how we work, pushing ourselves relentlessly in pursuit of success, recognition, or security, only to reach exhaustion and disengagement. At other times, the opposite extreme appears as avoidance, procrastination, or loss of direction. Both movements arise from imbalance, and both quietly generate stress. Extremes also appear in our emotional lives. We may suppress feelings in the name of control, only to have them surface later with greater intensity. Or we may identify so strongly with emotions that they dominate our decisions and behavior. Neither repression nor indulgence leads to clarity. Even our relationships reflect this pattern. Attachment can turn into dependency. Distance can become isolation. The middle way invites us to care deeply without clinging, and to maintain independence without withdrawing. Why does the mind move toward extremes? Often, it seeks certainty in an uncertain world. Extremes offer the illusion of control, clear positions that feel safer than nuance. Yet life itself is complex, fluid, and dependent on changing conditions. When we force rigid responses onto dynamic situations, suffering follows. The middle way does not ask us to abandon effort or feeling. It asks us to observe when our actions are driven by compulsion rather than understanding. Balance begins with awareness, recognizing when we are pushing too far or pulling away too completely. By learning to recognize these patterns in everyday moments, the middle way becomes practical rather than philosophical. It meets us where we live, offering steadiness amid the ordinary pressures of life. The middle way in thought, belief, and view. Dear seeker, some of the most powerful extremes do not appear in action, but in thought. The Buddha observed that suffering is often intensified not by events themselves, but by the rigid views we hold about them. The mind tends to divide experience into absolutes. We may believe that things must always go our way to be meaningful, or that nothing matters if perfection is not achieved. We may see ourselves as either completely responsible for everything, or entirely powerless in the face of circumstance. These extremes of belief create inner tension and conflict. The Buddha cautioned against such fixed views. He taught that reality unfolds through causes and conditions, not through permanent certainties. When we cling to rigid beliefs, we resist the natural fluidity of life. This resistance becomes a subtle but persistent form of suffering. The middle way in thought avoids falling into opposing extremes such as blind certainty and total skepticism. Instead, it encourages investigation, humility, and openness. Rather than asking, "Is this absolutely true?" it asks, "Is this understanding helpful? Does it reduce suffering?" Balanced view allows the mind to remain flexible. We can hold ideas lightly, adapt to new information, and respond with wisdom rather than defensiveness. This does not weaken clarity, it strengthens it. In daily life, this balance softens judgment, both toward ourselves and others. We become less driven by labels and more attentive to actual experience. Opinions lose their sharp edges. Listening becomes easier. The middle way in thought is not about having no views at all, but about not being imprisoned by them. When understanding is guided by awareness rather than attachment, the mind becomes spacious, responsive, and at ease. From this balance, genuine wisdom begins to grow. The middle way in effort, discipline, and practice. Dear seeker, even when our intentions are sincere, imbalance can easily arise in how we apply effort. The Buddha observed that many obstacles on the path come not from lack of effort, but from effort applied without wisdom. One extreme appears as overexertion. We push ourselves relentlessly, demanding constant progress, immediate results, and unwavering discipline. This often leads to tension, frustration, and self-judgment. Practice becomes a struggle, and the mind grows rigid rather than clear. The opposite extreme is negligence. When effort is too weak, practice becomes inconsistent. Attention drifts, motivation fades, and understanding does not deepen. What begins as patience can quietly turn into avoidance or complacency. The middle way offers a different approach, balanced effort guided by awareness. Rather than forcing progress, we learn to listen to conditions. We notice when the mind needs encouragement and when it needs rest. Effort becomes responsive rather than compulsive. The Buddha illustrated this balance through the image of tuning a stringed instrument. If the string is too tight, it snaps. If it is too loose, it cannot produce sound. Only when properly tuned does it function well. Practice is the same. In meditation, this balance shows itself as alertness without strain, focus without rigidity, and persistence without harshness. In daily life, it appears as steady commitment without burnout. When effort is balanced, discipline becomes sustainable. The practice no longer feels like a battle against oneself, but a process of cooperation with the mind and body. Through the middle way, effort transforms from pressure into stability. Progress arises naturally, not because we demand it, but because the conditions for understanding are wisely maintained. Emotional balance through the middle way. Dear seeker, emotions are among the most powerful forces shaping human experience. When unexamined, they can easily pull the mind toward extremes, either overwhelming us completely or being pushed away and denied. The middle way offers a wiser relationship with our emotional life. One extreme is emotional indulgence. In this pattern, feelings dictate our actions and identity. Anger demands expression, desire demands satisfaction, and sorrow becomes a story we repeatedly tell ourselves. While emotions are natural, when we cling to them, they grow stronger and more consuming. The opposite extreme is emotional suppression. Here, feelings are judged as weaknesses or distractions. Pain is ignored, grief is silenced, and fear is hidden beneath control. Though this may appear strong on the surface, suppressed emotions often return with greater force, manifesting as tension, numbness, or sudden outbursts. The middle way does not ask us to choose between these extremes. Instead, it teaches us to know emotions fully without being ruled by them. Through mindful awareness, emotions are recognized as changing experiences rather than fixed truths or personal identities. When joy arises, it is appreciated without clinging. When pain arises, it is acknowledged without resistance. When anger appears, it is observed without immediate action. This balanced attention allows emotions to complete their natural cycle, arising, changing, and passing away. Over time, this relationship builds emotional intelligence. We become less reactive and more compassionate, both toward ourselves and others. Difficult emotions no longer feel like threats. They become teachers revealing underlying needs and conditions. Through the middle way, emotional life becomes neither chaotic nor suppressed, but integrated. Balance here does not dull feeling, it deepens understanding. In this understanding, the heart learns how to remain open without being overwhelmed, and steady without becoming closed. Living the middle way in daily life. Dear seeker, the middle way is not meant to remain an idea understood only in reflection. Its true value is realized when it becomes a living principle, shaping the choices we make each day. It is in ordinary moments that balance is most clearly tested, and most deeply learned. In daily life, the middle way appears as attentiveness to intention. Before speaking, we sense whether our words arise from clarity or compulsion. Before acting, we notice whether our effort is guided by wisdom or driven by fear. This quiet pause creates space for balance. The middle way also guides how we relate to responsibility. We learn to engage fully in our work and relationships without becoming consumed by them. Commitment remains strong, but attachment loosens. When results differ from expectations, we respond with understanding rather than self-blame or withdrawal. Even rest becomes part of the path. The middle way teaches that rest is not indulgence when it supports clarity, and effort is not virtue when it leads to harm. By listening to the body and mind, we learn when to act and when to pause. In relationships, balance shows itself as care without control, honesty without harshness, and boundaries without coldness. We remain present without trying to manage every outcome. Living the middle way requires ongoing awareness. Extremes will still arise, this is natural. The practice is not to judge ourselves when they do, but to recognize them early and gently return to balance. In this way, the middle way becomes less about perfection and more about responsiveness. Each moment offers a chance to realign. When lived daily, balance becomes intuitive, and life itself becomes the teacher. Dear seeker, as we come to the end of this reflection on the middle way, It is worth remembering that balance is not something we achieve once and then possess permanently. It is a living process, one that unfolds through attention, humility, and repeated adjustment. Life will continue to pull us toward extremes. At times, we will push too hard. At other times, we will withdraw too much. This movement is not a failure of practice, it is part of being human. The middle way does not ask us to eliminate this tendency, but to recognize it with clarity and respond with wisdom. Each moment of awareness is already a return to balance. When we notice strain and soften it, the path is present. When we recognize avoidance and gently re-engage, the path is present. The middle way is not found in perfect equilibrium, but in the ongoing willingness to listen and adjust. The Buddha offered this teaching not as a rigid doctrine, but as a compassionate guide for living wisely within changing conditions. It honors both effort and rest, discipline and kindness, clarity and patience. As you carry this understanding forward, allow it to inform small, ordinary choices. Speak with care. Act with moderation. Rest without guilt. Strive without harshness. Over time, these small acts of balance reshape the heart and mind. May you learn to recognize extremes early and meet them gently. May your life be guided by understanding rather than compulsion. May the middle way support you in living with steadiness, insight, and peace. Thank you for walking this path, even briefly, together.